stunning retirement announcement that rocked the NFL. Quarterback Andrew Luck, he called it quits at 29 years old.
For the last 4 years or so, I've been in this cycle of injury, pain, rehab.
Now you lost your joy. Now when you are on the precipice of Super Bowl contention.
And it's been unceasing.
He's now got an offensive line.
And relenting.
He's got a defense. He's got everything we thought he ever needed.
And I felt stuck in it.
The Colts were in contention.
And the only way I see out
now
is to no longer play football.
You retire in March and April, not 2 weeks before the season.
Sorry.
From growing up to academics to playing football and now finally retirement, Andrew Luck has never chosen the easy path in life. Andrew Luck is the son of a former NFL quarterback. He's a college football Hall of Famer, was on pace to be a NFL Hall of Famer, helped Stanford achieve their best record since World War II, and even broke Peyton Manning's franchise record for passing yards in a season. But at the same time, he was his high school's valedictorian, he has a degree in architectural design from Stanford, and he loves to read so much that he created his own book club. On the field, you would expect Andrew Luck to be as fiery as his statistics, but Andrew Luck might be the only quarterback in NFL history who would thank you after he gets sacked. Andrew Luck's first purchase after his brand new contract was a robotic ping pong machine. He still uses a flip phone from the 90s, and to this day, he has no trace of social media presence whatsoever, which is why it's so impossible to figure out what happened to Andrew Luck. Luck dominated on and off the football field, but why did he grow up in Europe, and why did he decide to go to an Ivy League school? Why did he retire so early despite being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL? But most importantly, how did Andrew Luck get to where he is today? Is he happy? And despite the gross mismanagement of his career, will we ever see the return of Andrew Luck in today's NFL? This is the tragedy of Andrew Luck. Break! Andrew Luck was born in Washington, D.C., however quickly moved to Europe, splitting his time in the UK and Germany, as his father Oliver Luck had recently retired from the NFL and was looking to create an American football team in Germany. A few years later, Oliver Luck would be the president of the NFL's World League of American Football, otherwise known as NFL Europe. Despite this, Andrew Luck still didn't know much about football. In fact, his first introduction to the game came when he found an old VHS tape in his family's attic. What did the tape contain? Well, a 1985 regular season game where his father Oliver Luck helped the Oilers beat the Chargers 37-35. Oliver Luck attempted 42 passes that game, completing 24 of them for 286 yards, a touchdown, and an interception as well. But the special thing about that game wasn't his passing statistics, it was the fact that it was Oliver Luck's first ever game-winning drive in his young NFL career. Andrew Luck probably rewatched that game thousands of times in his parents' attic in London, England, just dreaming of doing what his father had done. Soon enough, all the way in Europe, young Andrew Luck wasn't just playing soccer, rugby, or even cricket. Andrew Luck was teaching the European kids how to play American football, and these were the fondest memories of Andrew Luck's childhood. He was tossing dimes to kids from Asia, teaching kids from Africa how to throw a perfect spiral, and Luck even remembers a Swedish kid who couldn't learn it for the life of him, struggling to even run routes. Luck spent 10 of the first 11 years of his life in Europe, 7 in the UK and 3 in Germany, where he grew up speaking fluent German. While in Europe, Luck often would visit Paris, Rome, Vienna, Amsterdam, and basically any famous European city that you could name. Andrew Luck probably visited it with his father, Oliver, when he was growing up. But rather than play American football 24/7, Luck loved a different kind of football, soccer. Not only did Luck love soccer, but he would also frequently attend cricket matches, rugby matches, and he even probably watched water polo while he was in Europe. Andrew Luck just loved sports in general. He was the ultimate competitor, and to prove it, when Luck finally moved back to the US with his family, he could have played high school football anywhere. Montana, Maine, one of the Dakotas, but nope. Andrew Luck wanted to play high school football in a state where high school football was practically religion, in Houston, Texas. Luck, who spent most of his life in Europe, would need some time to adjust to the high-speed Texan football, and as a result, he spent the first few seasons of his high school career watching and learning. But when he was a junior, Luck was finally handed the reins, and in 2006, he tossed nearly 3,000 yards as well as 27 touchdowns as he led his team to the championship game. However, he would lose by just 1 point, 34-33. The next season in 2007, Luck didn't just take a step forward, he took a gigantic leap. Although his numbers might have regressed to just 2,588 passing yards and 20 touchdowns, Luck's ability at the quarterback position was second to basically nobody in the entire country. By the end of his high school tenure, Luck was rated the number 3 pro-style quarterback and a 4-star recruit in the 2008 recruiting class, according to 24/7 Sports. He was also a second-team 5A All-State selection and a top 100 player in the whole nation. Luck's on-the-field performance garnered scholarship offers from Alabama, Northwestern, Purdue, Rice, and even an Ivy League-esque school called Stanford. If Luck was like any other football player, he probably would have gone to Alabama, Northwestern, maybe even Purdue. But Andrew Luck isn't like any other football player before him. He graduated as his high school's valedictorian and had a 6.5 GPA on a 6.5 scale. And Luck didn't want to just challenge himself physically. He didn't want to only challenge himself in the sport of football, but he just as badly wanted to challenge himself mentally through education. As a result, Andrew Luck decided to attend the quote-unquote Harvard of the West as he attended Stanford University, one of the most prestigious schools in the entire nation. Their football team, on the other hand, well, that's a different story. When Andrew Luck attended Stanford, the school was in the middle of one of the worst stretches of football the university had ever seen. Before Luck, their last winning season was in 2001, and the last time they won a bowl game, 1996. But they just gone 4-8, which seems terrible on the surface, but when you take into account that the school finished with just 1 win the season prior, it's a vast improvement. Now that the school had its new head coach of the future, it was time to get a quarterback to build around, and redshirt freshman Andrew Luck was the perfect candidate for the job. Not only could he compete at a high level immediately, but the way Andrew Luck was able to process information was unlike anything we've ever seen before. He memorized the playbook like a veteran and called audibles as if he was a senior already. It was truly something spectacular to watch. So redshirt freshman Andrew Luck, who sat out the 2008 season, was now the main man for the Stanford Cardinals. In his collegiate debut against Washington State, Luck managed the game, completing less than 50% of his passes for just under 200 yards and a touchdown. In his freshman season, Luck would manage games rather than try to win them, which is normal for most first-year quarterbacks. But on November 7, 2009, everything would change. Stanford was set to play number 7 ranked Oregon, a contender for the national championship that season. But instead of letting Luck manage the game or minimize his impact through 4 quarters, Jim Harbaugh leaned on his freshman quarterback, who didn't just deliver, he exploded. That game, Luck completed 60% of his passes, tossing 250 yards and 2 touchdowns as he led the Cardinals past the number 7 ranked Ducks 51-42. On paper, Luck's freshman season wasn't anything spectacular. He completed 56% of his passes for just over 2,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. But Stanford, who hadn't had a positive record in nearly 10 years, had finally finished 8-4, which meant the Stanford Cardinals, for the first time since the 1990s, were headed to a bowl game, specifically the Sun Bowl. Unfortunately, they would lose the Sun Bowl to Oklahoma State, and it wasn't because of Andrew Luck. In fact, if Andrew Luck had played that game, replacing quarterback Tavita Pritchard, who had 8 completions the whole game and 2 interceptions, Stanford probably would have won. But instead, Luck was sidelined with a broken right index finger, which needed surgery before he could return. Although Luck did miss the bowl game, it didn't really matter. This was Stanford's first winning season in what felt like forever. And instead of looking back and patting themselves on the back, Andrew Luck and Jim Harbaugh wanted more. Over the course of the first 3 games of the season against Sacramento State, UCLA, and Wake Forest, Stanford would win, but not in any ordinary way. Over those 3 games, Luck completed 64% of his passes for 674 yards, 11 total touchdowns, and 0 turnovers. turnovers. Andrew Luck was putting on a clinic. Over the course of the season, Stanford would lose just one game and finish with a record of 11-1. As the Cardinals finished with their best record since 1940, Stanford was the 5th ranked school in the nation at this point and was set to face off against number 12 ranked Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl. At this point in time, Virginia Tech was way more accustomed to playing in big bowl games, as head coach Frank Beamer had played in a bowl game every year since 1993. But Jim Harbaugh and Andrew Luck didn't let experience stop them, as they blew out Virginia Tech 40-12. That game, Andrew Luck had 4 touchdown passes, 300 total yards, and just 1 interception. But it didn't matter. Andrew Luck had capped off one of the best sophomore seasons in NCAA history. Stanford had finished 12-1 after the bowl game, but Luck's stats for the season seemed unreal. He completed 70% of all of his passes, had 3,338 passing yards, and even tossed 32 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions. The truth is, if Cam Newton hadn't put up 50+ touchdowns with Auburn, Andrew Luck would have won the Heisman Trophy as a sophomore that season, as he finished 2nd in voting. Stanford finished the season nationally ranked 4th overall, and Andrew Luck was widely presumed to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2011 NFL Draft. The thing is, he decided to return for his junior year so he could get his degree, which is typically a cardinal sin for any NFL draft hopeful, but the fact that Andrew Luck was able to achieve this just gives you an idea of how incredible of a prospect he was. When the season started, Luck picked up right where he left off, as once again through the first 3 games of the season, Luck had already accumulated 9 total touchdowns, just 1 turnover, over 800 total yards, and of course 3 W's in the win column. In weeks 7 and 8 against number 22 ranked Washington and number 20 ranked USC, Luck combined for 6 total touchdowns, 558 total yards, and even completed 74% of his passes. At this point in time, Stanford was at its highest ranking since World War II. The Stanford Cardinals were ranked number 4 overall in the nation, single-handedly thanks to a certain quarterback who tossed what felt like 3 touchdowns every game. However, Stanford's dream season would come to a screeching halt in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State. Although Andrew Luck completed literally 87% of his passes for 347 yards and a pair of touchdowns, it still wasn't enough to beat the Cowboys in overtime, as Stanford lost 41-38. The loss must have stung, but not as much as it must have stung to finish 2nd once again in Heisman Trophy voting, this time to Robert Griffin III. Luck finished his junior season completing 71% of all of his passes, had 3,517 passing yards, 39 total touchdowns, and just 10 interceptions. By the end of his college football career, Andrew Luck was a 2-time Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year, 2-time Heisman Trophy runner-up, was a Maxwell and Johnny Unitas Award winner, and was seen as the biggest can't-miss professional quarterback prospect since Peyton Manning. This man literally returned to college, told the scouts, try to pick my game apart as much as you can for an extra season, and the scouts couldn't come away with anything. He was literally a flawless prospect. For all intents and purposes, Andrew Luck was a can't-miss draft pick who would kickstart a rebuild for any team that drafted him. But before the NFL draft, Andrew Luck had one more thing to accomplish: his college degree. That's right, Luck, unlike most professional athletes, decided to stick around for his final semester at Stanford and actually finished up his degree in architectural design with a 3.5 GPA, something that most people don't do, and something that Andrew Luck did while being the best college football player in the country. Going into the NFL draft, there were 2 quarterback prospects everyone knew would go number 1 and number 2. Of course, Andrew Luck, but also the man who took the Heisman Trophy away from him, Robert Griffin III. On the surface, it may have seemed like more of a competition than it actually was, because in the pre-draft interviews, combine, workouts, and the game tape, the results all favored one man, Andrew Luck. Not because RG3 was bad in interviews or because he was even bad at the combine, but because Andrew Luck was just that good. Not just as a quarterback, not just as a leader, but as a human being. Andrew Luck wasn't looking to become a superstar, sign the biggest contract, and then wait until he got a nice cozy media career. As a result, in the 2012 NFL Draft, with the first pick, the Indianapolis Colts selected the successor to Peyton Manning, the best quarterback prospect since Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. And this is where the tragic mismanagement of his NFL career would begin. The beginning of Andrew Luck's NFL career was anything but glamorous. In his first NFL start against the Chicago Bears, Luck was sacked 3 times, had 3 interceptions, completed 51% of his passes, and honestly, he looked like a mess. If any number 1 overall pick went out there and did what Andrew Luck did, no way they would have been allowed to play in week 2. But once again, Luck was not like any other number 1 overall pick before him. According to Bruce Arians, on the first day of training camp, Andrew Luck had the playbook memorized. All the linemen were looking at each other like, who is this guy and what's he talking about? But he had the play and the terminology all correct. It was just that none of the other players knew it yet. Once Andrew Luck realizes he's been outplayed, outstudied, whatever it be, Andrew Luck makes sure it doesn't ever happen again. After week 1, Luck returned for week 2 against the Minnesota Vikings. And with the world watching, waiting for him to make the same mistakes that he made against the Chicago Bears, Andrew Luck made the world eat their words as he led the Indianapolis Colts to their first victory of the season, 23-20. That game, Andrew Luck completed nearly 65% of his passes, had 224 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and most importantly, 0 turnovers. Andrew Luck continued his rookie season doing what had to be done in order to win games. Nothing more, nothing less. A pessimist could point to Andrew Luck's 18 interceptions his rookie year and say that he couldn't protect the ball much, but the truth is that Andrew Luck had to get rid of the ball as soon as he could. It was just that simple. And this is a theme that would unfortunately follow him for the rest of his career and lead to an unfortunate tragedy. If he held on to the ball any longer than he had to, he would have been driven into the ground like a stake. Andrew Luck was sacked 41 times his rookie season and had a sack percentage of 6.1, meaning that on 6.1% of all of his dropbacks, Andrew Luck was sacked. This was probably when Andrew Luck started congratulating edge rushers for sacking him. That's right, Andrew Luck would literally congratulate the defenders for either 1, sacking him, 2, hitting him after he got rid of the ball, and even 3, blowing up a play. Andrew Luck was so full of sportsmanship that he would literally act like he was playing in a flag football game with his buddies after work. But instead of a flag football game, Andrew Luck was playing in the NFL, a league where guys are literally playing for their futures, their kids, and a paycheck. But look outside of Andrew Luck's sportsmanship and basic passing statistics, and you'll see that he completely turned the Indianapolis Colts around. From the worst record in football a year prior, granted because they lost their starting quarterback for a year, but all the way to an 11-5 record and a playoff berth. He also led the NFL in game-winning drives with 7 that season and was named to the first Pro Bowl of his career. In the playoffs, Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts would fall 24-9 to the Baltimore Ravens as Luck completed just 51% of his passes for 288 yards, 0 touchdowns, and a turnover, a sign of things to come in the future. But regardless, Andrew Luck was just 24 years old. The Colts came off of a playoff berth, and now that he had 1 season under his belt, Andrew Luck was ready to prove that he was in fact the franchise quarterback that he was drafted to be. That offseason, the Indianapolis Colts decided to address the defensive side of the ball with their first-round pick, Bjorn Warner, who was selected 3 picks ahead of DeAndre Hopkins. They spent their later-round draft picks on the offensive line, but their entire draft haul didn't amount to players that would make significant contributions during Andrew Luck's career. This would become a consistent theme and would ultimately be a key factor in his demise. Andrew Luck would play in front of another patchwork offensive line during his sophomore season, and his statistics were just a testament to how special this young man clearly was and how bright of a future he was destined to have. In the first game of Luck's sophomore season, he played about as perfect as anyone could. He completed almost 80% of his passes, had 216 total yards, and 3 total touchdowns as the Indianapolis Colts squeaked by the Oakland Raiders 21-17. After a Week 2 loss against the Baltimore Ravens, the Indianapolis Colts decided to finally get Andrew Luck some help to shoulder the burden of the offense by trading their first-round pick in the 2014 NFL Draft for Trent Richardson, who was selected 3 picks after Andrew during his NFL Draft. The Cleveland Browns had seen enough of the Trent Richardson experiment, and their frustration with his horrific ball carrier vision led them to doing whatever they could to recoup their poor investment. And fortunately for the Cleveland Browns, for the first time, they were the ones that didn't get fleeced in a roster transaction. Unfortunately for Andrew Luck, Ryan Grigson, the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, would bite on the draft bust, who would be out of the NFL after 2 years with the Indianapolis Colts. Over the course of the 2013 season, Andrew Luck displayed the same elite mechanics, pocket presence, and decision-making as he did in his rookie season. However, this year he would also limit his turnovers. Despite all of the Indianapolis Colts mismanagement, Andrew was still improving. The Colts continued to roll to yet another 11-5 record, as Andrew Luck was named to the second Pro Bowl of his 2-year career. Luck tossed 23 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions and had 4,199 total yards as well. He would get sacked 32 times this year, which is still a lot of hits for him to take, but not as much as the 41 in his rookie year. Andrew Luck not only flawlessly took the reins from Peyton Manning, but also maintained the success that the Indianapolis Colts had in the Peyton Manning era. In their first playoff matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs in the wildcard round, the Colts found themselves down 31-10 at halftime after a late second quarter interception by Andrew Luck, which took away any more potential points that the Colts were looking to score. However, in the second half, Andrew Luck and the Colts pulled off playoff magic as the Colts had 4 80-yard drives, including a 90-yard drive at the start of the fourth quarter and 4 drives that lasted less than 2 minutes, and to win the ball game. Andrew Luck connected on a 64-yard pass with T.Y. Hilton to win the game 45-44. Luck completed the game with 29 completions, 488 total yards, and 4 passing touchdowns, although he did have 3 interceptions in the ball game. The next week in the divisional round versus the New England Patriots in Foxborough, Andrew Luck's late game magic wouldn't shine again, as the Colts fell 22-43. Andrew Luck completed just 48% of his passes, had 2 touchdowns, but also had 4 interceptions in the game. That offseason would feature yet another horrific draft from the Indianapolis Colts, who attempted to address their offensive line by selecting Jack Mewhort with their second-round pick. Mewhort would last 4 seasons in the NFL before being out of the league entirely. This is even more unfortunate because the 2014 NFL Draft is recognized as one of the deepest drafts of the past decade, featuring players like Odell Beckham Jr., Aaron Donald, and Zach Martin. And although the Indianapolis Colts would have picked number 26 had they not traded their pick for Trent Richardson, they still would have selected with players like Joel Bitonio and Davante Adams on the draft board. Joel Bitonio would become a 4-time All-Pro offensive guard for the Cleveland Browns, whereas Davante Adams is widely considered a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL at minimum. Both players are still dominant to this day. Despite the lack of roster improvement, Andrew Luck was still determined to make up for the back-to-back shaky playoff exits that he had suffered during the previous 2 seasons. Luck had one of the most underrated seasons in NFL history, one that in a typical season would have probably earned him MVP honors. In 2014, Luck threw an NFL-leading 40 passing touchdowns, had over 5,000 total yards, and led his team to back-to-back division championships, and as a starter up to this point, had a 33-15 record in the regular season. And look, he was only sacked 27 times this year. In the wildcard matchup versus the Cincinnati Bengals, the Colts didn't have much trouble as they won 26-10, with Andrew Luck playing pretty much perfectly with 31 completions on a 70% completion percentage, accumulating nearly 400 total yards and a passing touchdown. The next week in the divisional round versus the Denver Broncos, Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts had a personal reason for wanting to defeat the Denver Broncos. Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck's Hall of Fame predecessor and the Indianapolis Colts' best quarterback in franchise history, had just thrown 50 touchdowns and led the Denver Broncos to yet another playoff berth. Andrew Luck, determined to beat Manning like he was Luke Skywalker defeating Darth Vader in Episode 6, tossed 2 touchdowns, 265 yards, and 2 interceptions as the Indianapolis Colts beat the Denver Broncos 24-13 to move on to the notorious AFC Championship game. And the AFC Championship game, thus made famous for Deflategate, which we have a separate documentary on if you guys want to check it out, Tom Brady and the Patriots obliterated the Indianapolis Colts 45-7, as Andrew Luck had a career worst game, completing just 36% of his passes, as well as tossing 2 more interceptions in Foxborough. Knowing the analytical, emotionally mature, and intelligent man that Andrew Luck was, he probably didn't dwell much on the game. In fact, if anything, he probably used it as a learning experience and motivation for the upcoming season ahead of him. Besides, he just had his career best season, and once again, like his sophomore season at Stanford, Andrew Luck was on top of the world. However, this time, it wouldn't go as well as before. During the 2015 offseason, the Indianapolis Colts would make two desperate attempts to find Andrew Luck a consistent threat at wide receiver. During the NFL draft, the Colts would select Philip Dorsett with their first-round pick. They would also sign the once great but injury-prone receiver Hakeem Nicks. Dorsett would get traded by the Colts following his sophomore season, and Nicks would come down with 38 receptions for 405 yards. Another wasted offseason. Up until the 2015 NFL season, Andrew Luck was an absolute Iron Man. He had never missed a start in 3 seasons, including the playoffs. And going back to college, the only time he missed was because of a broken finger. However, in 2015, Andrew Luck's career went down a spiral that it would never recover from. And when it looked like it couldn't get any worse, it somehow managed to continue to get worse. In week 3 of the 2015 season, in a shootout win over the Tennessee Titans, Andrew Luck took a huge hit that would completely alter his career by damaging his shoulder in unseen ways. But he immediately returned to the lineup after missing just 2 weeks. However, a few games later in week 9, Andrew Luck would suffer a lacerated kidney and a torn abdominal muscle that would cause him to miss the rest of the season. However, in a display of toughness, Andrew Luck somehow managed to finish the comeback versus the Broncos, winning 27-24 in the final minutes. After the season, despite a major injury and statistical regression, the Indianapolis Colts rewarded Andrew Luck with a 6-year contract extension worth $140 million with $87 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid player in the league. How did he celebrate? Well, he bought a nice robotic ping pong table and then went to a children's charity event in Indianapolis the same night. Fortunately for Andrew, the Colts finally had a decent offseason. First, by hitting on their draft pick during the 2016 NFL Draft, selecting center Ryan Kelly out of Alabama, and also by adding 2 future NFL Hall of Famers via free agency and trade, Frank Gore and Andre Johnson. When Luck returned in the 2016 NFL season, he seemed like vintage Andrew Luck. He started off the season torching the Lions secondary as he tossed 4 touchdowns, had over 400 total yards, and even had 31 completions, proving that although he missed some time, he was still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Against the Tennessee Titans, Luck performed well enough to get the victory, but his head would bounce off the ground, causing him to miss 1 week with a concussion. But when he returned in week 13 against the Jets, Andrew Luck once again decided to grace the NFL with one of his best performances, tossing 4 more touchdowns while completing almost 80% of his passes and blowing out the New York Jets 41-10. Although the Colts finished the 2016 season 8-8, Andrew Luck had one of the best individual seasons of his career statistically. He had a career-high 63.5% completion percentage, 4,581 total yards, 31 touchdowns, and just 13 interceptions. But he would get sacked 41 times, tying his rookie season for the most he's ever been sacked during a season throughout his career. It's almost as if the Indianapolis Colts didn't take the previous season as a cautionary tale, although they did have a slightly better offseason the year prior. The addition of Andre Johnson didn't pan out so well either, as he was a non-factor in the Colts offense and was far from the dominant player that he once was. Still, Colts fans, along with Luck himself, were eager for the 2017 season. Sure, the Indianapolis Colts were 8-8 the year prior, but it was just the first time in the Andrew Luck era where they had missed the playoffs when Luck started the majority of the season. At this point in time, if Luck was playing, playoffs were expected. There was even more hope for optimism, as the Indianapolis Colts would fire their terrible general manager Ryan Grigson and replace him with Chris Ballard. But unfortunately for Colts fans, Ballard would bomb the 2017 NFL Draft and the offseason, selecting Malik Hooker with their first-round pick, who had been a solid safety throughout his career when he has been able to stay on the football field. Andrew Luck would undergo surgery to repair his shoulder, which still hadn't healed after the hit against the Tennessee Titans in 2015. You see, that hit against the Titans didn't just cause Luck to miss 2 games, it stayed with him up until that surgery, and as a result, Luck would have to miss training camp, preseason, and eventually the entirety of the regular season, relearning how to throw a football again, meaning those prototypical throwing mechanics that got Andrew Andrew Luck selected with the #1 overall pick were officially gone. By the time Andrew Luck returned for the 2018 NFL season, things were drastically different for the Indianapolis Colts, but in an incredible way. For one, the Indianapolis Colts replaced Chuck Pagano, the head coach that Andrew was essentially carrying throughout his career, with Frank Reich, a brilliant offensive mind who was credited with constructing a game plan around backup QB Nick Foles to bring a Super Bowl to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Indianapolis Colts would also have a draft class that was so good that it would set their franchise up for Super Bowl contention for years to come. Listen to this. With their 6th overall pick, they drafted Quentin Nelson, a can't-miss once-in-a-generation guard out of Notre Dame. Then, they selected Darius Leonard 30 picks later before selecting Braden Smith a pick later, Tyquan Lewis, who is a very solid run stopper, and then Nyheim Hines, a versatile, speedy, pass-catching running back in the 4th round. This draft class was incredibly good, and then on top of this, the Indianapolis Colts were projected to have a league-high $106 million of cap space in the 2019 offseason. The Indianapolis Colts Super Bowl window has officially swung wide open, especially once the 2018 NFL season would end. But before we get to that point, we should actually talk about Andrew Luck's 2018 season. In Week 4 against the Houston Texans, Luck went off for 4 touchdowns, 40 completions, 464 passing yards, but more importantly, started a historic stretch of games where he tossed at least 3 touchdowns in a game. That's right. From Week 4 to Week 12, Andrew Luck threw at least 3 touchdowns in every single game. And over that stretch of 8 games, Andrew Luck completed nearly 70% of his passes for 27 touchdowns and 2,450 yards and just 8 interceptions. Over the course of the season, Andrew Luck displayed a maturity level in the pocket as a quarterback that he never had displayed in his life. This was probably due to the revamped offensive line that single-handedly made Andrew Luck go from one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL to literally having the lowest sack percentage in 2018 with 2.7%. Andrew Luck finished the season with a career-high 67.3% completion percentage, 39 touchdowns, nearly 4,600 yards passing, and just 15 interceptions. Andrew Luck earned the 4th Pro Bowl selection of his career, and even won the Comeback Player of the Year award. In the playoffs, Luck helped the Colts blow by the Texans 21-7 as he tossed 2 touchdowns as well as 1 interception. However, in the following divisional matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, in a preview of one of the most exciting rivalries for the NFL's future, Andrew Luck would duel Patrick Mahomes, and although he was turnover free, he didn't perform well enough to win the game, tossing just 1 touchdown and barely completing 50% of his passes, as the Colts would lose to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs 13-31. In the 2019 offseason, during training camp, there were rumors that Andrew Luck had been dealing with an unspecified calf injury. But as the offseason progressed, it wasn't viewed as anything serious. As OTAs came and went with preseason starting, and Andrew Luck still not having a solid timetable to return, people started to get concerned. On August 13, 2019, Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, came out publicly and stated that
it's a bone. I'm not good at these things, but it's called like something else. It's a small little bone.
After this, rumors started swirling around that maybe Luck would be able to play during Week 1 if things progressed well. However, as Week 1 came closer and closer, Andrew Luck's calf never quite healed. On August 24th, 2019, Andrew Luck was sitting on the sideline of the Colts preseason game against the Chicago Bears when leaked reports started circulating that Andrew Luck would soon retire from professional football. Lucas Oil Stadium, filled with Indianapolis faithful, didn't cheer Luck or even say thank you. In fact, Colts fans immediately started booing Andrew Luck, the man who literally sacrificed broken bones and limbs for the franchise. After the preseason game, in an impromptu press conference, Andrew Luck confirmed the reports that he would be retiring from football.
I haven't been able to live the life I want to live. It's taken my joy of this game away, and the only way forward for me is to remove myself from football in this cycle that I've been in.
Andrew Luck cited the never-ending cycle of injury and rehab as the reason he ultimately quit football. And honestly, can you blame him? Andrew Luck at the age of 29 had already accomplished what most dream of in a career. He was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame in 2022, and although Luck may never get a bust in Canton, there is no doubt he probably would have gotten one if he continued playing. The true tragedy of the timing of Andrew's retirement is that he retired right as the Colts Super Bowl window was beginning to open. The Colts had the most cap space in the NFL, a remarkable yet young defense, one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, a brilliant head coach, and instead of investing that capital by trying to build around Andrew, they would spend it in the upcoming years cycling from quarterback to quarterback to quarterback, trying to fill the void that Andrew Luck left. That's the part of Andrew Luck's career that is so tragic. The path to greatness was clearly in front of him, but he was so mentally drained and tormented from the toll the injuries took on his body, which could have been prevented had his career not been so grossly mismanaged by a man who had been given way too many chances to manage one of the greatest talents we've ever seen in NFL history. Nowadays, if you see Andrew Luck on a football field, it's not to play football. In fact, if you see him at all, he's probably with his wife and daughter, spending quality time he never would have got to have if it wasn't for retiring from football. When Jim Irsay was asked about a potential Andrew Luck comeback,
he's retired. We respect his decision. He knows what we think about him. We would always welcome him back with open arms.
Now that we know that we've probably seen the last of the gunslinger in Indianapolis, how should we view his playing time with the Colts? Well, to tell you the truth, Andrew Luck's personality is only topped by his on-the-field play. In the regular season, of course. Luck, for all of his greatness, was never a great postseason QB. In fact, as it stands, in 8 playoff games, Andrew Luck has tossed just 12 touchdowns to 13 interceptions while completing barely 55% of his passes. Does that mean that Andrew Luck was terrible? Of course not. In fact, in his short 6-season career, he reached the 38 touchdown mark 2 times, something that most quarterbacks can't say that they've hit at all. Not even Phillip Rivers or Ben Roethlisberger hit that mark once in their combined 36 seasons of play. The truth is that Andrew Luck was a generational talent who never got the chance to shine because his offensive line was constantly letting him down, and so was Colts management. Year after year, when opposing franchises were surrounding their quarterbacks with offensive lines that could protect a Brinks truck, Andrew Luck was being protected by essentially thin air. Still though, Andrew Luck was talented enough, and despite the lackluster roster surrounding him, a healthy Andrew Luck kept dragging the Colts to an 11-5 record, even when they probably shouldn't have. Andrew Luck was so special, not because his arm was bigger than everybody's, not because he could make every throw, or not because he was even clinically accurate. Andrew Luck was special because he understood the amount of time it took to be elite at his craft. And like those who have succeeded before him, he doubled that amount of time and dedicated his life to becoming the best at what he does. The best stories told about Andrew Luck aren't the ones where he throws over 2 defenders into a bucket, or even when he avoided defenders in the pocket to make magic happen. The best Andrew Luck stories are the ones where he outsmarts people, not because he was trying to, but because that's just how he was wired. Andrew Luck will forever serve as a cautionary tale for teams who strike gold at the QB position, but surround him with the wrong individuals to manage their careers. His story is what Archie Manning feared for his son Eli when he refused to allow him to play for the Chargers in the 2004 NFL Draft, and it's one that we can only pray that we don't see repeated in Duval County.